Can you talk a bit about who you've worked with when it comes to gathering data and how you've used it?
So the foundation of the work of Select Greater Philadelphia and our business marketing and attraction work really is research. So really at the base of who we are and what we do is gathering information about our region and what makes it a great place to do business. So I think as a beginning point, we've got a great foundation of very, whatever public data is out there, and as updated as you can possibly get your hands on. So at least from that perspective, we had a great foundation in an organization that kind of exists and is functioning and moving things forward. As a group, a project team around the Talent Dividend, we've also pulled together, worked with a consultant actually out of the University of Pennsylvania to pull together both a survey and a set of interviews with higher education institutions to try to understand a little bit better and kind of begin to get an inventory of what unique practices these institutions are executing to support student persistence year over year, and to move people towards completing their degrees. So there's sort of two different ways we've at least approached things. We have a good base of knowledge just in terms of the basics of data in our region, but then we've also drilled down a little bit to try to highlight some of the promising practices that are already going on in our region to see how we might get those practices in the right people's hands to suggest to others they could do something similar.
And the mayor's Office of Education is also heavily invested in looking at the numbers. So there's a Council for College and Career Success, which looks at the pathways from Philadelphia public high schools into higher ed and the success rates of those Philadelphia public high school graduates in higher ed in Philadelphia. And one thing they're taking a look at is who's successful, who's facing challenges, who's completing, who's not. And the schools, the Philadelphia colleges and universities, are really providing a lot of information on their students, anonymous information, but aggregated so that the Mayor's Office of Education can take a look and see what interventions are going to be the most helpful. And, although that it's a city-focused initiative out of the mayor's office, it's the population that if we can make the most difference there, we've probably made the most difference region-wide. So that's a pretty unique initiative, and it's because this mayor is really very data-driven, very open source, really wants to take a look at things and make it as transparent as possible to people.
So does that initiative have a good bit to do with kind of creating, for lack of a better phrase, that seamless transition from high school to college, or even from, grade school, middle school, high school to college? I know that's not exactly your work, but just so people have a sense of, what's behind your work. Is that part of the initiative, is kind of figuring out those career pathways, and that college can be a step for a lot of students, not just some?
I think that's sort of an underlying principle, but, I think part of it also is really about understanding, again, sort of this basic research that helps you understand where we are today, identifies some of the flags or the points in time specifically that can be challenging for students, in obviously Philadelphia's case, from a large urban school system to continue and persist, identifying some of the potential early warning system, and then really higher education institutions are going to figure out how best their institution responds to that information. Right. But I think it's foundationally about one, I think where they started was how many go and who are they and from what schools. I mean, we have, I think the numbers now in the school district of Philadelphia is an enrollment of like 145,000 kids from kindergarten through 12th grade. So the Philadelphia school system alone is managing a size and scale of a student population that's really quite enormous to begin with. So I think where they began this process was really about that. How do we understand where our students, if our students are going, are they being successful? And if they're not successful, at what point is there any commonality about what point in time that starts to occur?
Yeah, I think so. And I think that in that meeting, the higher eds are at the table, the mayor's office is at the table, some key nonprofit high school support and college access programs are at the table. So that's really important K through 12 and 9 through 12 work that's getting done. Okay,
great. Are you guys doing any sort of work related to, and I'm sure you are, related to, I guess this is similar to the college access in your city, and just it kind of parallels what we've just been talking about, but kind of making the like an honest inventory, I guess. This should also be a data kind of framing sort of question. Some cities have mentioned doing a real honest and straightforward inventory about the access they feel that institutions are giving students across the board, whether it's public school or private school students. It parallels the seamless transition concept. But is there a structure kind of built in that's right there that you're able to hand to, let's say, the mayor's office and say, this is how we're working, this is how we're achieving these types of goals too?
Well, there was a study done by a research organization, I think funded by the Knight Foundation in Philadelphia, to examine college access and the pipeline and the pathway. And what they found was that there is a pretty robust group of college access programs in Philadelphia that have had a lot of success, and they work together, but that there wasn't the same level of support for those students when they entered college, and that those students were experiencing dropout rates that were, too high and sort of, clearly problematic from the whole perspective of the college access mission. So I think since that report, the Talent Dividend has come into play, and there has been more collaboration from the college access position to retention and persistence in school. But it is characteristic of Philadelphia that we have pretty well-developed and ripe and successful organizations that have very targeted missions and are doing great work. And what was missing was knitting it all together. And I think that's what we're getting much, much better at. In fact, a couple of these college access programs have merged recently. And I think that makes them stronger and more effective. And we have foundations now that are at the table taking a look at all this cooperation and saying, okay, it's a better environment for investing because there's a pathway for assisting students all along the history of their education.
Are there any areas that I'm missing that you guys want to brag about, talk about? Anything that is that you really were hoping to get a chance to talk about and mention to colleagues across the country?
I don't think there's anything we haven't touched on other than just suggesting that there's probably a few other folks to get more detail on some of this work in a large place like ours.
Right.
I certainly feel like I can't represent the wealth of infrastructure that we have here. But I do think Deborah makes a great point in that this work is starting to get stitched together. Efforts of our United Way here, in collaboration with the Economy League of Greater Philadelphia, are really beginning to look at the entire continuum as a process and how all this infrastructure fits into that larger system. So I think, we're kind of getting ourselves to that next phase of work, which is about that in a really, really big place. How do we take these isolated pockets of really successful, targeted work and bring them together, so that an individual's experience over time is, as to use your word, as seamless as possible, so that they can be successful.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah, I think, Philadelphia was fortunate in many respects that it was not as hit quite as hard by the Great Recession as other regions. We have such a strong foundation in healthcare and in higher ed and education. It cushions the blow. We don't boom, but we don't bust either. And I think now that we see employment demand increasing at a variety of levels in the region, the business community is increasingly invested and interested because they need this talent. And we are lucky to be in a region where talent has been in relatively strong demand for a long time, and even through some significant economic dips. And so, and the challenge from the business end, I think, is that there's just a lot of search friction out there. You know, we have a lot of talented graduates and they love Philadelphia and they want to stay. And there are a lot of employers with demands for both high skilled and degree folks, and connecting them together is something that is challenging. It's challenging in any region. And I think the business community is recognizing that by working with organizations like Campus Philly, like Graduate Philadelphia, the Chamber, they're getting access to talent as well, and they're reducing some of that friction. And I think my hope is that kind of cooperation is what we're going to see increasing in the future.